welcome to episode 2 of Life After AI, where our goal for this episode is for me to figure out, should I buy Microsoft stock?
Let's get into it.
Um, yeah. So let's, um, and the reason I'm curious is because they acquired ChatGPT, which just seems like the move of the century, but I could be wrong. So like I said, let's figure it out.
So we probably shouldn't say that they acquired Chat GPT. Like, it's kind of like I guess a temporary deal. So I guess we'll start off by kind of breaking down what the deal terms look like, because I think that in itself is pretty interesting. So um, Microsoft is investing a total of about 13 billion into OpenAI as a whole, and from that, they are going to get 75% of all of OpenAI's profits, until until that they've received a payback of their initial 13 billion, and then also 92 billion on top of that. And OpenAI has to pay a total of 150 billion to all the other investors. And then once they've paid out that total, which is like 255 billion, which for the record, massive amount of money, obviously. After they pay all of that back, then all the equity goes back to OpenAI. So that in itself is a pretty interesting deal structure. Like OpenAI is, Microsoft is basically giving them, a launch pad to develop the technologies that they're wanting to over the next however many years. And Microsoft stands to gain, quite a bit from that. But assuming this all goes according to plan for OpenAI, like at the end of the day, they're going to get all their equity back. They're going to basically have built out this. At that point, they'd potentially be, one of the biggest companies in the world, because I mean, $255 billion, that's like an absurd amount of money.
For sure. Am I wrong in thinking like this is a new type of deal? I mean, the way I heard that is like Microsoft is essentially acting like a bank. Um, and
In a
I've just
way,
never
yeah.
I've just never heard of any sort of deal like that. So am I missing something or?
I I personally have not heard of anything like that either. So that very well could be the case. But yeah, they are kind of acting like a bank in the sense that they're just giving them, $10 billion up, or 13 billion up front to use however they see fit. And then Microsoft, obviously can incorporate a lot of their technologies into their cloud services, into Bing. We could talk about that for a little bit. And then, but at the end of the day, assuming everything goes according to plan for OpenAI, like Microsoft's not going to hold any long-term equity from this deal.
Right. Yeah. Shouldn't that be concerning for Microsoft? And at some point they're gonna depart. They're gonna split from OpenAI, and then, I mean, doesn't that leave them wildly vulnerable?
Well, that's something that I'm not sure exactly how that's going to work, because one can assume, you know, if Microsoft is, for example, integrating a bunch of OpenAI's technology into Bing to create this new, like, super advanced version of a search engine that they're planning to like use to take on Google, what happens to that kind of relationship that they have when they no longer have equity in the company? Like, do they get to still keep all of the technology that they've built? Like, I would assume so, but it's just the specifics of the deal are not super clear. And I think that's probably done on purpose because Microsoft seems to be holding their cards pretty close on this one.
Um, it'll be interesting to
But I
see how
will
that Bing
say,
thing.
I was just say real quick, I think the reason why it's probably structured this way is because I would assume that, knowing what OpenAI knows, that it would be very hard to convince them to like give up a significant portion of their company long term. So this is probably like the only kind of deal that they're really open to, because they know
That OpenAI
the
was open to.
Yeah, because they know the potential of what they're building, and it would not be smart of them to give up half their company or whatever permanently, um,
It'd be
when they
like
know they're
Tesla,
on the cusp of something amazing.
right? It'd be like Tesla uh, selling out to Ford or something. 10
Yeah.
years ago.
It yeah, it just wouldn't make sense for them to do that, but they've structured it in, like, a very smart way where they're getting, you know, all the money that they could really need. I mean, 10 or $13 billion, I guess it is. Um, that sets them up to pretty much accomplish whatever they want, and assuming everything goes the way that they're planning, like, this is kind of like an all or nothing deal for them. Like, if it goes if they are able to leverage that 13 billion to build what is probably gonna turn into one of the first, if not the first, like, true AGI systems, then they're gonna become one of the biggest companies in the world, and at the end of the day, after they pay back all their investors, they get all their equity back. But if that doesn't work, then it's like they're still paying out 75% of whatever they are making back to Microsoft, and they'll pretty much be stuck in that loop indefinitely. So this is kind
Right?
of their, like I said, their all or nothing deal.
Shoot. Could you imagine signing that? You'd have some
Right.
sweaty palms going on for sure.
Oh yeah.
So,
Definitely.
right. Um, it'll be interesting. A the the thing I have the thing I think they have in their favor is the fact that to me it seems like every business other it just seems like every business is going to be incorporating ChatGPT into their uh, procedures, into their practices, whatever you want to say it.
Mhm.
It just seems like every company is going to be doing that. So I just don't see this failing. Uh, Um, one interesting thing that I did see though was that it was called like hold on, I think I wrote it down. There was some browser that was already and had already incorporated ChatGPT. Um, so I mean, it looks like their plans for Bing already has some competition. I'm sure they have
Mhm.
way more resources than Microsoft to destroy this. It looked like just like a small startup, but
Yeah. Yeah. I'd be curious though if the website you're mentioning, if it actually is using, Chat GPT, like their technology, or if it's just something they're kind of building out on their own. Because I do know, like right now, for example, you like OpenAI, their other like language models are open to be used by pretty much anybody. But the model being used for Chat GPT, um, that one it's not open to the public, but they have like select business partners that they're allowing to kind of use and experiment
mm,
with until they do decide to open it to the public. So, and from what been saying over the past few weeks, like they've already opened up a wait list for this in particular. So that seems very close, and I would assume it's going to happen within the next several weeks or a couple months. And so when that takes place, we're just going to see like this whole other wave of AI startups popping up all over again.
so,
Because
so yeah, to kind of clear that up, um, just for myself. So I guess there's two ways businesses are incorporating ChatGPT. One is you just use it. Like if you're a lawyer, like we talked about last episode, you're just feeding in the questions to get the document that you want, or you can use it as oh, like this
like a
browser would be
tool
using it.
to build like applications on top of it.
Yeah, correct.
Yeah.
Okay,
Um.
that's interesting.
Yeah.
And
So, but
that's
the
but eventually they're going to want to have as many companies using it to build applications and stuff. I mean, because that's just gonna.
mhm.
I
Yeah,
mean, they're just gonna
absolutely.
dominate the
And
world that way, pretty much.
yeah, I mean, if you have like the most advanced model, then it only makes sense for companies to one, like use it for their own employees, teach them how to leverage it properly, but also like companies are just going to naturally use your technology over anything else that exists. And when that happens, like the more people that are going to be actively using it, whether it's businesses building on top of it or just people using it for their own jobs, the better it's going to get over time. Because I mean, just like the network effects of social media in a way where more people that are using it, the more people are going to get invited to it and see it and join. Same way with these language models, the more people that are using it, the more feedback they're going to get. They can retrain the models. It's going to get even better. And so I find it at this point, like seeing how fast ChatGPT has gotten. The latest number I heard was over 10 million users, which is absurd. I think it'd be very hard for anyone to catch up at this point, unless some other company just put out something like absolutely incredible. But
Yeah.
I feel
So,
like with with the Microsoft partnership and also just like the amount of users they have using ChatGPT, it's kind of like in game for them at this moment. Like there's not really any other company that's going to be able to catch up.
so that seems like a good place to uh, talk about Google and DeepMind.
Mhm.
Um,
Right, right.
yeah, so I sent Alec a tweet. Um, looks like there's some rumors that Google is lobbying in DC against any further AI development. I don't know specifically what they're trying to target, but it does look like they're trying to halt this AI movement. And based off everything we just talked about, I mean, they've got good reason to be panicking in my mind. I mean, too, and all across Twitter, I've seen like all week, like Google and then Code Red. I don't know if you've seen any of
Right,
that,
right.
but yeah.
Yeah.
So I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think they definitely are panicking, and the fact that they're already resorting to like regulatory capture, it's kind of sad to see. I mean, Google, they were the company that kind of started a lot of this stuff. Like a lot of the original language models were built from Google, and then they just they just seem to have been left in the dust by other companies. Like uh OpenAI, like they're a lot of the technologies they're using at like the core came from Google. And it's just interesting to see how they've kind of built this foundation and had a head start on everybody else and then just absolutely blew it because I mean, other companies are just innovating much faster than them. And I would assume it probably has to do with the fact of just when companies get that large, they just become very inefficient at innovating. And it's just a cycle of like a company getting super big and bloated. And then you have these new hungry startups that are just going to out innovate them, like OpenAI, for example. Um,
Mhm.
so they're basically backed into a corner now. And they're, I guess, the specifics of what they're trying to do is still unclear, but I think the rumors probably definitely have some merit to them. And yeah, it's just sad to see them trying to prevent innovation so they can kind of protect their own business, protect DeepMind. So we'll see how that plays out.
Yeah, I think it definitely provides a good lesson for Microsoft moving forward. Because I'm sure they're. I mean, it seems obvious they're gonna bring in a lot of revenue over the next however long. What was the? Yeah, I was gonna ask you that earlier. How long is the deal for between them and OpenAI?
It's
Just
it's
until
open
the
ended until they
yeah.
get their money paid back. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Okay, so that was the question I was gonna ask you. How long do you think that's gonna take?
Ooh, that's interesting. 255 billion.
Yeah.
I mean, that's
What does
it'd
do you
be
know off the top? Do you know off the top of your head like what? I mean, so Tesla most. I don't know. This could be the stupidest thing I say all year. Are they the most profitable company in the world at the moment?
they're the most profitable car company, but not the most profitable company in the world. I'm pretty sure Apple is still at the top. And I want to say I'm not sure what exactly they're doing annually in profit. I know it's in the tens of billions per year, probably maybe even hundreds of billions, but So, I mean, for OpenAI to get to that point, it would definitely be a decade plus, I would imagine, unless we're just like severely underestimating how fast AI is going to progress.
Mhm.
Because I
Well,
mean,
based off the insane amount of content I see saying 10x your productivity, 10x your whatever using
mhm.
ChatGPT, I think it's gonna go quick. Also, I find that very annoying. I hate the whole 10x everything about your life. Like, just how about you let me have a
Right,
break for a second? Jesus.
right, right. But I mean, so kind of back to the original question you posed of like, is Microsoft stock a buy? Um, I think if you want to make a bet on AI in the public markets, then at the moment, Microsoft is pretty much your best bet, I would say. Um, but how exactly the stock reacts is going to be interesting because, if OpenAI really does skyrocket with their technology and their revenue, then there's going to come a day where that cash flow from OpenAI is going to stop. But
Mm,
I think regardless, there will be, if OpenAI does reach that point within the next few years and they become like a significant addition to Microsoft's revenue as a whole, then I would definitely say that that's like, you know, a company to keep an eye on for sure. Potentially could be one of the better investments over the next like 5 to 10 years.
right, right. And who would have thought that? Who would have
Mhm.
thought? In my mind, that's like a crazy comeback. Microsoft coming out of nowhere for the win.
Yeah. And what I found interesting too is they've been very like they've kind of downplayed this whole deal. Like I read the official announcement that Microsoft put out and like is a very short article, no mention of any specific numbers. They just said like we've built this relationship with OpenAI. We're gonna integrate their tools into our technologies, and like they left it very vague. So they've been kind of hush hush on this whole thing, and not like I said earlier, just kind of keeping their cards close to their chest. And I think that's really smart of them. So it's gonna be very exciting to see. Like, are we gonna see this crazy Bing come back? Like, is everyone's gonna be using Bing search now? Um, so I'm excited to see what comes of it for sure.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It'll be cool. Um, well, do we want to? You got any more thoughts about it, or do you want to try and move on?
No, we can move on. I know you mentioned earlier like Chat GPT, and companies using them like for or their employees using them. I mean, do you kind of see this wave happen where a lot of companies are going to be training their employees on how to use Chat GPT, how to leverage it to do their jobs better? Like, do you think that's going to become a lot more prevalent?
Yeah, I think so. And I don't know if these two things are related, but have you been seeing all this stuff about all these layoffs within tech?
I have, yeah. And my initial thoughts on that is I don't think that they're related to AI. I think it's just they grew, companies hired a lot last year in preparation for what they thought was going to be this continuous boom of the economy. And things are obviously not going that way for them. And then they see like people like Elon buying Twitter and firing 80% of the workforce and companies doing just fine. So they see stuff like that and they're like, okay, how can we kind of do the same? And now we're just, there's this math. I'm not saying Elon's the one to, he's the one leading the charge on all of that, but it definitely played a bit of influence into these other tech companies laying off a bunch of people.
I I, I think it lays the foundation for um, large amounts of incorporation with ChatGPT, for sure.
Mhm.
And I mean, even without the layoffs, that seems like the only path forward, um, forward for whoever. So
Mhm.
yeah, it'll
Did
just
you
be
see
interesting. I mean, Well, it'll just be interesting, and hopefully we get to a point where we can have people on, um, and then see how they're
Mhm.
incorporating it, and what that looks like. So yeah, I don't know. I think that's exciting too.
Did you see the BuzzFeed news?
Yeah, I did.
Yeah. So supposedly BuzzFeed is working on ways to, or they're already going to start implementing ways to generate content using Chat GPT. And what
Wasn't it
I,
wasn't it like all their content was gonna be uh
I'm not
AI
sure.
generated?
I saw mixed reports. I think I can't imagine that they're just going straight into all of their content being used or being generated through Chat GPT. I'd imagine they're just kind of experimenting with it at first. Um, but yeah, the BuzzFeed stock had a good reaction to that. I think at its highest point, it was up like over 200% that day. So that was interesting to see. But
Nice.
yeah, I mean, we're already seeing these big companies that are going to start experimenting with it and seeing how it works into their employees' lives, um, and then
On
you
the
have on top of that, I was gonna say then, like, on top of that, these companies, like, laying off a ton of employees. Um, I think a lot of this innovation and also just the recession itself, it's putting these companies in a position where they need to start, you know, getting back to the days where tech companies were trying to be as lean as possible, innovate as much as possible, and just generate as much cash as possible. And so I think, at least for the financial markets, like this, all of this stuff happening, it's going to be a good thing for companies in the long term.
um did you see well shoot, lost my train of thought now. Oh, I know what I was gonna say. So on the opposite end of the spectrum of BuzzFeed, um, using ChatGPT to make a lot of their content, I did see a tweet uh, that said I'm a something along the lines of like I'm about to start paying more for human generated content, like if I know it's
Mhm.
made by a human. Um, so I, as a writer, I was excited to to see that.
Right, right. Yeah. What are your thoughts on that as a whole? Because I do think there will be like this initial interest in people that are, like you said, willing to pay more for human generated content. They don't want to read articles knowing that some AI software just wrote it for them. But do you see that continuing? Because in my mind, I kind of feel like at a certain point, AI writing is going to be so indistinguishable from human writing, and companies like BuzzFeed, for example, are going to build out their own models that are just like highly trained to write very attentive articles that are just like they're gonna have all of this information input where they can curate the best title to get the most clicks and then have like the best articles written to keep people's attention. And I feel like long term there's not, at least in applications like that, it's gonna be hard for human writers to kind of keep up. But yeah, what are your thoughts on that?
Um, at the moment, I agree. I mean, I think the majority of writing will get overtaken or however you want to phrase it. But I do think there will be one area of writing left open, and that's going to be like writing that's geared towards sharing human experience. So
Mhm.
personal stories is what I'm thinking about specifically. Like these last couple of weeks on my Substack, that's why I've just been sharing stories from um, when I lived in Montana, and I fail to see how ChatGPT can. Yeah, I mean, I guess it could make that content, but I don't know. I don't know if the fact that I wrote it gives it more value or not. I think it does.
Mhm.
And so, yeah, I think any writing outside of that will get overtaken. But like, because yes, AI is going to dominate, but we still have to exist as humans. And until AI um, kind of becomes conscious,
Right.
I just don't think it can accurately write about the human experience like we can. I don't know. Maybe that's wrong, but in my head,
No, I could.
that seems to
Yeah.
be about right.
Yeah. No, I could agree with that. I think certain, I guess, sections of writing will get overtaken much earlier than others, particularly news articles, for example. Because I think just the whole incentive structure for journalists writing news and stuff right now is very, very skewed to just have like sensational articles that are maybe not the most accurate depiction of what's happening. And so it'll be interesting to see, like, does AI just enhance that even more? Because it can just take in so much more data than what a human would. And it can, like I said, curate the perfect title to generate the most clicks and have like the most sensational article to go the most viral. Or are we just going to see a lot of news writing get heavily commoditized and then it's just going to be like you'll have whole news organizations that are just powered by AI that's just taking input of information and then writing articles and spitting them out. So that's going to be interesting to see play out. I think that'll probably get overtaken by AI first, and then some of the more creative aspects of writing, like you said, the writing about human experiences, maybe like long form storytelling. That's going to take a bit longer to get overtaken.
Right. Yeah, it's just tricky because I mean, there's no doubt in my mind that if you were to plug in like for my essays, it could probably it definitely could spit out um, an effective copy or a news story that fits seamlessly into my work. Um,
Mhm.
so so I don't know. It's just going to be tricky to see where the value ends up being and whatnot. So, but for the moment, I
Yeah,
feel I
for
feel
sure.
good. I think it lies with humans.
Mhm. Yeah, and I think for now, like a lot of, if anything, AI is helping writers like generate ideas in a more effective way, or maybe write articles faster using like some. Like I think I sent you a tool last week that, like an AI writing tool that can, like as you start writing, it keeps up with what you're writing along the way, and then gives you like suggestions of what, um, like how to phrase things going forward or different topics that you could incorporate. So I think, um, for at least for now, it's just going to be a tool that writers can leverage to one, make their current writing a lot better, and two, kind of increase their output of writing as a whole.
Mm. Yeah, no doubt. Um, I think we'll have to look more into that watermark. Have we talked about that on the during the episode, or was that before?
That was before.
Okay. Well, just to fill in our uh, our listeners, I found this tweet from AI Breakfast just talking about some on Twitter, but wait, um, just talking about this potential new technology that could like help us identify what is AI generated writing and what's human generated writing. Alec and I, we couldn't figure out quite how it works in the specifics, but we'll have to dive into it a bit further and figure that out because I do think that would help a lot. Um,
Mhm.
but two, you know, it might help. It might help us develop our critical thinking because at the end of the day, I guess it doesn't matter if it's human produced or AI produced because what matters is the content. Um,
Right.
So we'll just have to figure out like, oh, we'll just have to focus more on, well, is the writing valuable? Is it insightful? Is it whatever you're looking for? Mhm. So I don't know. Maybe the competition
Yeah.
will just push human insight even further, and we'll have some of the best writers yet. I don't know. Seems possible.
I could even imagine like certain laws being set in place that would require any any sort of writing that's published on the internet, whether it's a blog, a book, whatever. It would just require the original author to kind of distinguish, was this written purely from your own mind, or did you use AI tools, or was it completely AI generated? Like, I think in the instance of completely AI generated writing, I don't think it'd be a bad thing if there were some sort of, you know, laws in place that would require people to at least just disclose that so you would be aware of it.
Right. And two, man, that's tricky. So is it, how much of it is your writing and how much of it, like, let's say you're using ChatGPT, how much of it
Mhm.
is OpenAI's writing? Um, and so
Right.
do they have
Yeah.
any grounds for copywriting it, or,
Mhm.
if you produce a book that you got through ChatGPT, are you going to be sued or whatever? So I don't know. That's interesting.
But then there's the third level to that, which is Chat GPT or just OpenAI in general trains all of their models off of existing writing on the internet that isn't even theirs. And so like there's multiple levels to it, like
Oh, Jesus.
how exactly does copywriting like how do you enforce copywriting in a world where there's just robots on the internet just outputting images, videos? Like how do you enforce that? Like I don't I don't think you really can unless you just like set these laws in place that at least require you to disclose if it's AI generated or whatever. But that's also going to be a very interesting field
So
to watch develop.
do you think, maybe this already exists? Probably not. Like, what if there was some technology developed that prevented your work from being able to be um, put into these models that whatever AI is training off of?
Mhm. Yeah, I don't know if anything like that exists now, but I would imagine something like that might end up happening, or maybe it's just again like I think we'll probably end up seeing, for good or worse, a lot of potential AI regulation, popping up over the coming months. And so, maybe they'll require these AI companies to like they can only train their models off of data that they own or they're paying for the rights to. Because at the moment, like Chat or OpenAI trains all their models just off of data that's just been scraped from the internet. Like they didn't ask for permission to do that. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it, but I do think there's an argument to be had when you have writers or artists that are putting a lot of time and potentially it's their whole career that they're using to their whole career is, art or writing, whatever it may be. And then they're putting it out there for people on the internet to see. And then it's just kind of turn around and being used to, make AI even better without really their permission. So
Anything.
yeah, I'm not really sure how I see that playing out, but I do think there's going to be some regulations that are going to be start putting into place.
Right. Um, Two thoughts on that. The first being, yeah, I didn't think about that because earlier I had remarked that maybe this AI revolution, like, produces some of the best human writers of all time. But as we get better, well, yeah, you mentioned it. So does the AI. Um,
Hmm.
so that's kind of a moot point. And then secondly, maybe if you can only train your AI on information that you have ownership of or permission to access, maybe that helps slow down the monopolization of the internet of OpenAI's potential
Mhm.
monopolization of the internet. Um, maybe makes it a little bit more fair. So that could be an interesting and the second kind of usefulness in that in a law like that. So
Mhm. Yeah, I think I'm obviously very pro innovation, um, pro capitalism in general, but I just find it very hard to see some sort of scenario where there isn't going to be a monopolization of AI technology. Um, I think there's just the natural way of how AI progresses and improves exponentially over time. There's there's going to be very few companies that kind of hit that inflection point of the exponential improvement. And so I'm just not sure that I see a scenario where there's gonna be like maybe 1, 2, or 3 AI companies that kind of control a majority of the AI technology being used. Um, and they're gonna get so big and have such highly trained models and so much data that they're just untouchable. Um, and I think if that's obviously a lot of power, and if that's in the wrong hands, it could really set up for some bad scenarios there.
no doubt. So in terms of OpenAI's competition, um, we have DeepMind, but are you aware of any foreign competitors? Because, like, let's say OpenAI takes over the internet. Um, as an American, that's great because then that kind of solidifies our place up top. But that puts the rest of the world at a severe disadvantage. So then maybe you see a rise of global unity or globalization, which whether that's a good or bad thing, if that's the course that things take, that seems like that would seem logical.
Right. Yeah, no, I'm not aware of any foreign competition at the moment. I would imagine there's definitely projects that are in the works, or maybe we just haven't heard about yet, but probably nothing to the level of what OpenAI is doing, for example, at least not yet. But that does bring an interesting point. You know, we initially like at one point we had the global space race for innovation, and now we're probably gonna end up in a scenario where we kind of have the global AI race of company or countries that are they want to be leading the world of AI because whoever's ahead is going to be it's going to make it very hard for anyone else to catch up once they get to a certain point.
Right. Right. But maybe I don't know. That's tricky. Um, I mean, I guess if we want to get into international politics a little bit, like, in this situation, this really highlights like the ineffectiveness um, of an operation like the Communist Party in China, because by halting innovation, they probably had startups kind of with the same goal of OpenAI, but maybe I don't know. This is hypothetical, but there's a good chance they got squashed.
Mhm.
Um, but now in this scenario, China's now screwed. Um, so I don't know. It's just that's interesting, but
Mhm.
definitely highlights the importance of kind of if you're the leader of a country, letting your people just run. You know,
Right. Yeah. No, I agree, and I will say I don't think OpenAI is at a point where they are untouchable by any other company. I don't think it's come to that yet. I think they're very close, especially with this massive investment they just received from Microsoft. But I wouldn't say it's over just yet for anybody else. Like I still think that, Google could have a potential to do something, especially given just the massive amount of resources they have. Um, I mean, they have DeepMind, which has done some pretty cool stuff, but they've been relatively quiet. It's really the only AI, like massive AI uh, applications that have come out so far that have kind of taken the world by storm have just come from OpenAI. Um,
D- uh,
but
can I ask you? So, what about Tesla? I mean,
Mhm.
I know with them kind of geared towards producing self-driving cars, I mean, I'm not mistaken, right? They have quite the AI operation going on as well. What do you think that is applicable here and like can kind of compete with OpenAI? Or are they two totally different markets? I mean, what's going on?
Mm. At the moment, it's two totally different markets. But I do see a potential for Tesla to make their way into AGI in general, as time goes on. So, like right now, they're obviously focused on um, cars that can drive themselves. They have their full self-driving software that's in beta right now, and not the it's not in the best state at the moment, but it's getting a lot better. I think they will be the company that solves autonomy for consumer vehicles. And then you also have to take into account that they're building like their Optimus robot, their humanoid robot that
Okay, so I
they
don't know
are.
much about that. Well,
Mhm.
what is that?
It's their they announced it last year, I believe. And it's a humanoid robot that is powered basically on the same tech stack as their vehicles. So it has a set of cameras. It has, whatever computer hardware they're using. And the logic behind that is if you can kind of get their AI up to a point where it can drive, as well or better than a human, um, for to solve a task like that, you are getting fairly close to um, solving AGI as a whole because driving, whether we think it or not, it's an extremely like complex task. There's so many decisions that we make while we're driving that we don't even really think about. Um, so the idea is that if they can get it to work through cars, then they could also have other applications through like a robot, for example, that can work in factories and do jobs for people that are, either extremely difficult to do and maybe they're dangerous to do, like construction, whatever. Um, and so that's going to
So,
be. Go ahead.
so how is that different than Boston Dynamics Atlas?
Um, yeah. So Boston Dynamics, they've been around for quite some time. And I think while what they have done is definitely very impressive, and I don't want to downplay it by any means, I think a lot of the videos that they put out are, uh, I guess, a bit orchestrated. Like their robots are doing is kind of pre-programmed to do. And again, I'm not trying to downplay what they've done by any means because it is very impressive, but the
And there's
approach.
probably certainly a market for something like that.
Absolutely, yeah. But the approach that Tesla is taking is not like, okay, we're gonna build this robot that can walk, and then we're gonna train it to do very specific tasks. Their approach is we're gonna build this robot that can be trained to do any task that a human could do. Um, and so they're two extremely different approaches. Tesla's obviously being way more difficult, but um, if they were to solve that issue and, have built some sort of robot that can basically be trained to do whatever task you want it to do, in a way, you've pretty much solved AGI at that point as well, because then you can teach it to communicate with other people, kind of have its own mind in a way, and so that I guess that's more of like a real life application of AI that we're seeing kind of unfold. So there's going to be, robots walking around in factories and out in public construction sites, and so that's going to be very interesting to see.
Hmm. That's yeah. It's really I wonder what the timeline is on that, like 10 years, 5, 15. But
Hmm. Yeah, I think a lot of the more advanced like AI applications we're seeing, it's too early to try to put a timeline on it, but it's going to reach a point where we're seeing like just like week by week, just rapid improvement. And then at that point, it's like, okay, we've hit that, inflection point of exponential improvement. And then things will become a lot more clear as to, how fast this stuff is actually going to be or improve enough to where it's ready to be used at like a commercial level, like for anyone to be able to buy these robots. Like I think Tesla has said that they want to start out by just using it in their own factories just to kind of, you know, see what it can do and fix any bugs that need to be fixed before they even thinking about letting anybody else buy it. But, at the point that they take orders for this robot for anyone to be able to buy, then it's like, okay, we're getting pretty close to that level where things are going to get a little bit scary.
yeah, yeah. Um, gosh, and I just don't have. Okay, so what do you do? Do you try and implement? I mean, last week we talked about UBI. So do you try and get ahead of the curve and get all the details figured out now, which is certainly not happening? Um, I mean, I imagine a scenario where we're playing catch up. Um, and I don't know. Be interesting to
You
see how
mean
that
like
plays out.
us as humans, we're
But,
playing catch up against
I guess the
AI? What do you
government in
mean?
this point, in this instance.
Oh, right, right.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, just given our government's current understanding of technology and innovation, I think it's pretty much inevitable to where we're going to be in a position where the government is trying to play catch up, and they aren't going to be able to keep up at all.
Right.
So there could be a time where things get a little bit messy until some other restrictions or whatever are put in place. Because I think the less the government does, the better, in my opinion. But when we're talking about AGI as a whole, it could potentially be very dangerous. And so I think there definitely needs to be some sort of regulation in place or just at least some sort of oversight to where things don't get out of hand and get to the point where there's no going back. So I think right now that's a very real possibility, just given that our the way our government currently operates is just not suited to control something like this at all.
Right. Right. Yeah. There's a lot of our the effectiveness of our discussions need to it needs to increase for sure. At the very that's what needs to happen to start. I mean, without that, we're definitely screwed. So
Yeah.
be cheerful and happy investment.
Because the
So
the clock is ticking basically. Like AGI is coming whether we like it or not. And obviously it's much smarter for us to try to get ahead of that while we can, and I don't think that's happening at the moment. And so either
to
we
be
do
fair
start
though,
making.
I mean, so now this is like our second kind of formal discussion about UBI, and I find them difficult. I mean, it's just a hard thing to grasp, especially coming from uh, like you come from a mindset where it's like, yeah, the less the government does, the better. And it's just such a poor concept. Like, how do yeah, it's just difficult to grapple with. So I get it, but it, you know, needs to start happening.
No, yeah, no, I totally agree. I think, I've always been of the opinion that the less the government does, the better. But when it comes to this in particular, they need to do something and they need to handle it properly because it's a very real scenario that things do get out of hand and become potentially dangerous for, our country as a whole. If things are rapid or innovating too rapidly, or this technology does get into the wrong hands and it's being used for, applications that we wouldn't want it to, if it does get to that point, it's going to be very difficult to kind of reel it back in and stop it. So this is the one instance where I'm like, okay, our government does need to do something. Like now is the time. Not to be
Yeah,
all doom and gloom, but
right.
just
No,
things to
I think it'll be
consider.
like anything else. There's gonna be good stuff and there's gonna be bad stuff. Um,
Absolutely.
just- right.
I think that covers pretty much everything we had on our list for today. Was there anything else you wanted to touch on before we kind of wrap it up?
No, no, I think we got it all.
Okay, cool. Thanks everybody for tuning in, episode 2, and we'll be back next week.